What did that one teacher at your school get fired for? So, first-year university philosophy. Professor planned a study group that he was going to lead before the exam. We all show up. The professor and one female student don't show. Next day in class, he jokes about having a private study session with her. Fast forward a few weeks, they get married in the school chapel, and he gets fired and joins the Navy. Next story. Well, he didn't get fired for effing a cheerleader. Not sure the administration knew. He didn't get fired for attending the football players' parties and supplying them with drugs. Again, not sure the administration knew. And he didn't get fired when he was busted for public urination behind a local bar. But he did get fired when they found all of our final exams, final papers, and other assignments upgraded in his desk drawer when they moved his classroom over the summer. Turns out he never graded anything and simply gave kids the grades he thought they should have. Next story. Had a kid in one of my classes that had a medical condition where he couldn't hold it if he had to urinate. He had to get to the restroom immediately. All of the teachers knew he had special permission to leave class to go whenever he needed. One teacher, though, made him wait and wet himself right in class. They had to block the classroom off so the custodial staff could sanitize his chair and basically the whole floor. His parents doubled down, raised holy hell, and didn't back down until she was fired. Good for them. Next story. High school algebra teacher Mr. Robertson. He knew his crap. He made algebra fun and he was unconventional. The first day of class, he threw the textbook on his desk and it slid off and hit the floor. "This is your textbook," he said. "I'm required to give it to you. Take it home, keep it safe, bring it back undamaged. We'll use it for homework. Don't bring it to class." And he was the cool teacher who rode a secondhand motorcycle as his primary or only vehicle. He stored his writing leathers in the classroom locker. He also put his briefcase in there, and it sat there the whole year unopened as far as I could tell. He taught us from handouts and from what he wrote on the board. He showed us his tricks to solve equations, and he ran the math club, and he made it fun. He told all of us that he was adding an extra test to our course, and it would be worth half of our grade, and allowed us to study for it in class while he walked around giving people extra help. And the test was fake. He handed out questions from Mad Magazine. He just made us study more. We were not even mad. But the one problem he had was with our school dress code for teachers. He wanted to teach in slacks, nice shoes, and a nice shirt. The school wanted him in a suit and tie. He was allowed to take off the suit jacket if he wore a vest underneath. This was South Texas, and it got hot in the classrooms at times. He argued, they demanded. And he pointed out that the history teacher got to teach wearing a jersey and shorts. The school countered that the history teacher was also the coach, and that was his uniform. So Mr. Robertson volunteered to be an assistant coach. The school said, though, it didn't work that way. So he showed up wearing a suit. At the end of the month, teachers were complaining that he stunk. He countered that he wasn't going to pay for all that dry cleaning. And the school cracked down. So he showed up in a perfect three-piece suit made out of denim. Blue jeans blue with stitching that looked like Levi. Even the tie was denim. That lasted a week before the crackdown. Then he showed up in a corduroy suit. Our class asked him if these suits were not expensive, and he said that Houston had lots of great secondhand stores. The corduroy suit, it lasted 3 days. Then he was a chaperone at prom. He arrived in a three-piece suit and tie, which was completely pink. This was in 1981, by the way, so he cut quite a figure. He told us that the principal yelled at him for that one. He made a habit of coming in with his suit on Monday and leaving his jacket and vest in the locker. He taught in suit and pants and shirt with tie. Sometimes the principal caught him and he'd pull the jacket out of the closet for a few days. And he just wasn't asked back at the end of his contract. Last I heard, he went to work for a chemical engineering company in their R&D team for several times more than our principal made a year. And that's when I found out that while teaching us, he was a doctoral candidate working on his math dissertation. He really loved math and wanted to share it with everyone. The following year, my algebra teacher was a woman who wore floor-length dresses and wrote equations on transparencies while talking directly to the overhead projector. If we didn't do it by the book, it was a problem. And people would be like, "Yeah, we have to keep breaking the bad habits that Mr. Robertson gave his students." Okay, so like getting the correct answer faster? All right, everyone, I wish I had a teacher like Mr. Robertson. He is my spirit animal. He's like Saul Goodman in season 2 when he starts showing up with the suits. Dressing with color, back in the 80s, mind you, this man was ahead of the time, God bless him, and he paved the way for people like me who love dressing with colorful attire. Thank you, Mr. Robertson. Thank you for your service. Next story. So, one of the coaches got a student pregnant. This really pissed off the girls' gym teacher he'd been fooling around with. So the school lost 2 teachers at once, and the girl disappeared quietly. Her brother was in my grade, she was younger, and they all moved away. Next story. Home economics teacher had dementia or something of the sort and would straight up leave school in the middle of the day. Wouldn't tell anyone where she was going. She did this like every week, multiple times per week. We would be in the middle of class and she'd disappear, and someone would have to go and tell the office that she left. She also took a few of us on a trip to the grocery store, and on the way there she goes, "Yeah, I ran over a child one time," and then she just laughs like, okay. But yeah, anyways, they fired her after she almost burned the school down because she left the stove going with food on it. Next story. Having sex with one of the students that she was fostering and actively trying to adopt. She was a 7th grade teacher and the kid was 13, 14. Couple of years later, the 8th grade science teacher was jailed for SAing one of the girls on the cross-country team. He was the coach. Allegedly, he fingered her in the classroom. Then another teacher married his senior student. He was a young teacher in his early 20s, and I don't think they started dating until she was well into her college career, but no clue. He still works at the school. Another teacher resigned due to speculation that he was sleeping with the senior student. Turns out the student was infatuated with him and was posting a bunch of fake stories online. Teacher had a wife and young kids at the time. They're still together and seem to be doing good though. Next story. I had 2 teachers in high school, one male, one female, who were both in their late 30s, both married and both pretty attractive people. Their classrooms were right next to each other and they would openly flirt in the hall between classes. It was a running joke amongst the students that they were having an affair, but I don't think anyone truly believed it. It was just low-hanging fruit of teenagers. Until one night, I get a call around 3 a.m. from one of my friends who lived in this neighborhood in town that was near some railroad tracks, the same neighborhood where both of the teachers lived. Apparently, there had been a bad accident at the railroad crossing and someone in an SUV got hit by a train, and the word was getting around that it was the 2 teachers. By the time school started that morning, the rumors were confirmed when both teachers did not show up because they were both in the hospital, and we had subs in both classes. They had apparently sneaked out of their homes and were carrying on their actual affair somewhere out in town. Then on the way back to their neighborhood, tried beating a train across the tracks and got smoked by it. They got caught having an affair in a very public way by getting hit by a train. The male teacher amazingly walked away from it with minor injuries. The female teacher, on the other hand, spent weeks in the hospital and almost died. I think she had to relearn how to walk and talk. She sued both the railroad company as well as the male teacher and won, I believe. I don't remember if they ever got fired, but they definitely weren't at the school for the rest of the year, or ever again after that. I just so happened to have both of them as teachers at the time, so we had substitutes filling in for the rest of the year. Those 2 classrooms were insanely awkward after that day. Next story. Rye Windsor was our German and geography teacher at Northeast Intermediate in Midland, Michigan. He was German himself and a war orphan, World War II. But he was an amazing teacher, though, and even had his own learning system for German. Also, he didn't teach us just German and geography. There would be days where we'd come in and on his chalkboard, which he invented, it was divided into 8 or 12 rows of chalkboard, which could be rotated so that you had, in essence, 4 chalkboards, and it was great for group tests and learning in general. But he had stuff related to philosophy, criticism, critical thinking versus obedience, and so on. And you gotta remember, this guy had seen firsthand the deaths of his parents to bombs, the aftermath of war, and then he immigrated to the US and joined the army and rose to the rank of colonel after 3 decades of service. First active duty and then the reserves. Retiring at 56, the dude even had a Meritorious Service Medal of Honor for his contributions to the Army Reserve. And they say he retired from teaching in 1986, but people in the know learned that he was basically forced out, threatened with firing. They didn't like that he wasn't teaching by the book, and it's possible some parents just didn't like that he was handing out pamphlets on important and critical philosophical subjects when he was supposed to be teaching us German and geography. As well, this was the Reagan era, mind you. While his pamphlets covered things like the sacrifices the early founders of the USA made, like losing farms and businesses to confiscation or burning, losing loved ones, etc., and thus at first glance sounded very patriotic, all of his lessons ultimately were about questioning authority and using critical thinking skills to demand answers to BS. And parents tend to just assume that this is subversive. And hell yeah, it was, in a good way. But the truth is, if you ask most students who had him for German and or geography, like me, they will tell you he was probably one of the best teachers, if not the best teacher they ever had. I mean, we're talking Dead Poets Society level teacher. We're talking Socrates, and we know what they did to both of those guys. Rest in peace, Raimund Weinzer. They did you wrong. Next story. Punched a student out of her chair when she refused to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. This was 2 years after he made me demonstrate proper jumping jacks in front of the entire co-ed class, and it's because I had been using one arm to hold my large breasts in place. All of the boys hooted and hollered like it was a strip show. I was 14. Next story. I felt bad for my one. He was genuinely the sweetest guy and we all loved him. He was never inappropriate, but he could build rapport with us like no one else. And my mate found out that his house had been robbed. This teacher knew he smoked cigarettes and knew he needed to calm down. He said to me, "Take him for a cig and come back in 5. Another teacher overheard him and got suspended at first and eventually fired. Should he have let us been smoking? No. Was this a genuine human being who could see a 16-year-old in distress and knew he needed to go and do something he was going to do to calm down anyway? Yes. So, I stand by Mr. Phillips. Next story. I had a German teacher that nobody liked. He was a hard ass with no chill. For example, he would make us take practice quizzes for homework and grade them for accuracy. However, I realized that if you just did what he said on the assignments, you were probably going to walk away with a B. If you cheated to get a better grade on the practice quizzes, then you didn't learn the stuff and you wouldn't get a good grade. He was a hard ass, but he wasn't that bad. With that said, he was forced to resign when he jokingly threw a piece of chalk at a student and she complained to the administration. The problem with being the teacher nobody likes is that you can't joke around with anyone. I received this info from the teacher himself. And as an aside, this teacher took a trip to Italy every year and offered the trip to any school staff or any of his students. I went when I was in 11th grade. It was an amazing trip. It was him, me, a senior, and 3 other teachers. We were up by 6 a.m. and sightseeing until midnight. We only ate good, non-touristy restaurants. And it was my teacher's 40-somethingth time going, and he was fluent in Italian. We spent 2 weeks traveling all over the country on a bus. Definitely a trip of a lifetime. It wasn't school-sponsored, so we all drank at dinner. Usually the teacher would have 2 wine spritzers and almost pass out. The other student and I would make sure he got to his hotel room, and then we'd go out into the city all night long. Next story. So, it was essaying his football team. He'd get them drugged up, and then he would diddle them. He used pictures of them in the act as blackmail. A couple of kids reportedly unalived themselves over the whole situation. This apparently went on for over a decade before anyone said anything, and then the rest came out. He only went away for a handful of years and is already out living life again. Next story. Slapped a kid in the face. 5th grade. Granted, she was old school when I had her in the early 80s, and she was ancient then. She slapped our hands with a ruler and made us pray before lunch, public non-religious school, but that was also during a time when principals gave us paddlings too. She loved me though, so I got by. A few years after I left her class, she finally snapped and got called out on it. Next story. Worst teacher I ever had. Knew nothing about the material, allowed open cheating during exams, negligent in supervising labs, this was chemistry, to the point that it might be criminal. A classmate got a mild acid burn on his face and filled the classroom with fumes, and she didn't even react until half the class was already out the door. They told us she was going on medical leave, and then we never heard about her again. Next story. He was 24 and the tennis coach. Started sleeping with a 19-year-old student. She wasn't one of his students, but they had met at a bar over the summer. She used a fake ID. Since she was a student, he was fired. They got married about 2 years later, have a couple of kids, and just celebrated 25 years together. Next story. I had a history teacher who told all of the students in the senior class that Obama was going to tax 5 cents for every text message. Some of us, including myself, were old enough to vote. I called him out on it asking for the source, and he told me the Washington Post. So that night I scoured the 2008 internet to find any report whatsoever, and of course, it did not exist. The next day I came back to class and I told him I looked into the Washington Post and I didn't find anything. He then tried to explain that I misunderstood him and he said, the New York Post. Figured he would do this. And I told him I already checked there and every other major news source as well, and politely suggested that he may have been using his position to manipulate students into voting a certain way and then he kicked me out of class. And then, almost immediately afterward, he was fired and everyone thought it had something to do with me reporting him or something, which I didn't do. It turns out he had been stealing school computer equipment to use it in his weird sector of a Baptist church. He was prime MAGA before MAGA existed. All right, everyone, this one's a little bit different. I want you to reply. I'm going to say something and I want you to reply to it. There's one word, okay? I'm going to say this word and you have to reply to it in the comments. Obama. What do you say next? Obama. What do you say after you hear Obama? Next story. So, high school gym teacher fraternizing with female students outside of school. Then, grade 7 science teacher got in trouble for taking his lunch breaks at a strip club. Not sure if he got fired. Dancers were mostly former students of his. Next story. There was a girl who would walk into his room every day and try to talk to him. She wasn't in his class, so he was weirded out by it. He would regularly play music during class while we studied or worked on projects. He made a playlist full of stalker songs. Think Somebody's Watching Me by Rockwell. He would change the song to something from that playlist whenever she showed up. It was all in good fun for the class, but when the girl found out about it, she said he was harassing her, and he was fired without any further investigation. He got his job back a couple of years later, thankfully. Everyone loved him. He was awesome. Next story. Miss Finley, 1983-ish. 8th grade American history. She goes off on a tangent about Cain and Abel, how Cain betrayed Abel, and that God marked Cain and all of his descendants, and that's where black people came from, even in that era. And at that age, we all knew that was not a good thing to say. There were 2 to 3 black kids in the class, but everything carried on. The next day, the principal comes and asks her to go with him, and an assistant principal takes over the class. Never saw Miss Finley again. Next story. It boiled down to Parkinson's. He had Parkinson's and was trying to coast to retirement. Didn't teach anything in the 2 classes I had for him. After many parent complaints, he was offered early retirement or he'd be fired. He took his own life on campus for all of us kids to find on yearbook pickup day on the last day of school. Next story. When I was at the playground with my child, a kindergarten group came in. 2 teachers, both on their phones. One child fell off the swing and started crying. One teacher barely looked up and said, "Oh, you'll be fine." Then another girl came to the teacher and said she really had to go to the bathroom. And the teacher replied, "You can hold it." And the girl started crying, saying she couldn't. And the teacher then insisted, "You have to hold it." And the girl kept crying and ended up peeing and pooping her pants. So I took my kid's spare clothes, they were way too small but better than nothing, and some wet wipes and helped her change. Then I asked which kindergarten they were from. It was a public playground in a park, and I called the headmaster to file a complaint. I hope those teachers were fired. I'm not a wild helicopter parent, but kids should learn and they should fall sometimes. But human dignity matters at any age. Next story. All right, I used to be spoiled to hell and back by my old 7th grade music teacher. He would ace me on everything, even if I did a piss-poor job at my assignments. I had plenty of those. I moved after being at that school only for a year, though. After I graduated, I saw a news article online that he was arrested for diddling one of his students. I guess 12-year-old me dodged a bullet? Next story. This was around mid-2000s in middle school. So she kept all of the girls after class one day. I always walked to class with one of the girls, so I waited around, and when she got out, she told me what happened. The teacher basically unbuttoned her shirt and flashed all of the girls in her bra. She then asked them if they would be uncomfortable with her teaching like that, and that they should be mindful of how they dress and how they show their chests, because it can be distracting and inappropriate. She was in her 60s and they kind of just let her soft retire because the principal was her husband. My friend did say, though, that she was pretty stacked. Next story. My Chem 101 professor my first semester at university was an alcoholic and taught a 7 a.m. class. He came into every class, every morning, either hungover or still drunk from the previous night, regularly put the chalk down and would regale us with stories of last night's adventures at the gay bar where he accidentally cupped a guy's balls while playing pool. As for me, I got an A but went on to Chem 201 and realized he didn't teach me anything, and I was completely unprepared. He so horribly botched the foundation of my chemistry education that I changed majors to a STEM field without chem. Next story. In 8th grade, my English teacher also had to teach us some bullcrap life skills class. He decided, and as high schoolers we happily obliged, to blow it off and show us some Top Gear reruns during these classes instead. When it came to assignments, he just copied our marks from English class and adjusted them by a couple of percents to make it look legit. Easiest class ever. Until the headmaster walked into his classroom one day and caught him red-handed. He was gone the next day already. Next story. My grandpa. taught shop, and a local punk kid, 18-year-old senior, kept escalating insults for months, went a step too far and insulted my grandma to my grandpa's face. Unfortunately for, and unbeknownst to said punk kid, grandpa was at one time the Pacific Fleet boxing champ during World War II. Punk kid lost all of his front teeth and had his jaw wired for a bit. Grandpa got fired, even in the 50s, but regretted nothing. He is also legendary for having broken his hand punching a bowl between the eyes and knocking it out. His brothers all swore it was true when I was a kid. They may have been messing with us though, as they were all quite fond of tall tales. I believe the one about the punk kid, though. Grandma showed us the newspaper clipping about it. Apparently, the kid was only not prosecuted for public obscenity because he was considered to be adequately punished for the crime by my grandpa. So whatever he said was pretty foul for the time. Grandpa was fired but not prosecuted, and charges were not pressed. Next story. Teacher at my school got canned for an inappropriate relationship. He started dating a former student of the school when she was in her late 20s, and she had graduated before he was even a teacher. She just happened to be an alumni, and they were similar ages. Nothing shady, but the school felt it was inappropriate. Next story. Alright, so don't know if she fired or just stopped turning up, but she had been getting increasingly weird with us, like ranting about teenagers having unprotected sex and stuff. Then she didn't turn up for a couple of weeks and no one seemed to know what had happened. We then saw an article in a local newspaper saying she was passed out on a park bench with a bottle of alcohol. Her 3-year-old was sitting on the floor by the bench. Never saw or heard anything about her ever again. Next story. Alright, never got fired but was found in his 70s, abandoned alone in a dementia crap-the-bed nursing home. Mr. McDonald. He was a teacher in a New York public school who always had a select group called Mac Boys, and they added new boys as the older boys graduated. They all came from homes with an absent dad, divorced, dad died, foster care. Back then, everyone thought he was a wonderful man. He took the boys on summer vacations and weekend trips to the beach, amusement parks, camping, museums, and so on. Years later, as adults, some of the boys reconnected and talked about what happened to them. No one pressed charges, but 2 of them wanted to know where he was and if he was around kids. They found him across the country in Arizona in a nursing home. They told the nurses he was a predator. Next story. S ate a girl, then his own parents threatened to kill the girl if she came forward. All 3 were arrested and it was a huge scandal as she was a 2nd grade teacher in Catholic school. Then, high school coach invited girls over to practice one-on-one at his apartment, gave me his private number, asked if I'd help redecorate his office as he had a new couch and wanted me to tell him if it was comfy enough. I never went and gave the phone number to my parents immediately, so no harm to me. Next story. Bank robbery. She was a suspected getaway driver in a heist that occurred 5 years prior, but had no record. I guess the DA offered her a deal and she pled guilty. Went to jail mid-year. I do have to say that she was one of the most fun, imaginative, and aspiring teachers we ever had for 7th grade English. The kids loved her and worked hard for her, and the parents were sad to see her go. Next story. So we had a popular film class in middle school, super competitive to get into. I fit the criteria and had film experience but didn't get in. They went on out-of-state trips and filmed all sorts of awesome things. I was so disappointed at the time. I noticed that only certain types of students were in the class though. A year later, he's fired and arrested. It turns out, in addition to the stuff shown to the school, he was filming extracurriculars with the students. Both boys and girls. I was very glad I wasn't in that class after that. Next story. Long time ago, 1976-ish, our physics teacher, Mr. Jones, was known to have a short fuse but was a great teacher. Until he asked the class if we thought we'd pass our O-levels, so we were 15-ish. My mate, who was actually a science brain box, was the only one who put his hand up. For reasons no one understood, the teacher thought he was being a smartass, walked over, pulled him by the hair to the front of the class, and started to pound his head against the wall. He suddenly stopped and said sorry, and then walked out. The plasterboard wall had broken with the force. My mate was shaking like a leaf. 1 hour later, parents turned up at the headmaster's door and Mr. Jones was never seen again. Genuinely frightening at the time, my mate got over it and became a minor celebrity at school, if that's the right word. Next story. There was one teacher at middle school who would take away students' phones if they were using it in class. He would put it in his pocket and wouldn't give it back unless you reached in and took it. I don't know if anything more suspicious than that ever happened or if that was enough to be considered worthy of police investigation, but damn, that guy was universally hated. Everyone was happy when he was fired. Next story. had a 6'6", 280-pound coach who had an affair with a 5', 100-pound cheerleader, which began the summer before our senior year. Cost him his job, his marriage, his kids, and about $6,000 on the new toys he bought her after graduation. Strange times they were in the early 90s. Next story. Not a teacher, bus driver. Got fired for taking a water bottle from a kid who was showering other kids. When the driver took it, the poor baby got splashed and completely lost his crap. Parents threatened to sue for assault. Board folded instantly. Driver was fired for unintentionally doing what the kid was intentionally doing to other kids. Next story. My grade 7 English teacher took a trip during summer vacation with a grade 12 student to BC where they got caught robbing a bank. Needless to say, neither one came back. And then, as a bonus round, when the police searched the student's room, they found a headstone that he stole from a cemetery. Not sure how his mom missed that one. Next story. A male science teacher at our middle school, who was also a football coach, went after a kid that was a class clown and was the size of a 4th grader. The kid had been pushing his buttons all year, and one day between classes we heard yelling and the sound of desks being knocked over. The kid ran from room to the room across the hall and hid behind the teacher there, begging her for help. The science teacher followed him into her room. His face was red and his neck veins were bulging. She stayed between the two and talked the other teacher down. Without her, I think he would have killed that kid. He was told to turn in his resignation the next day. Next story. He came to the high school chemistry class and wrote preemptive retribution on the board. Then pushed 2 heavy tables against the doors to prevent anyone from getting in or getting out, and then screamed at the kids for the next 45 minutes for being lazy and not submitting their homework. This was before cell phones were a thing, and he retired a few days later. Next story. In the 50s, in my elementary school class, we had a teacher who was so violent that none of us would even ask to go to the bathroom because, depending on her mood, she might slap us across the face. So we had this boy who was slow, and he had a hard time learning to read and write. Because I had polio, I stayed in the classroom during recess and our lunch recess. So she had him stay in with me, and I worked with him. One day, she looked at his writing, and she just started slapping him over and over. One of the other kids started crying, and that B word just kept on slapping little Joey. Finally, one of the kids ran out and got another teacher to help, and she came in and almost tackled the teacher. Then the principal came, and even then, the teacher kept trying to hit Joey. They sent the teacher home, and the rest of the day, the principal was our teacher. The next day, we got a new teacher, and Joey got sent to a different school. Next story. Husband was in band class during high school and had an amazing instructor, popular, fun, and one of his most memorable teachers. Unfortunately, the instructor's wife got discovered having an affair, and he pretty much lost his crap and killed her and her lover. Totally rocked the community and my husband's mind. And he's still serving a life sentence without parole, guys. Pretty sad. And my husband still speaks fondly of those years in band. Next story. He was the weightlifting coach. When one of the female team members won first place in a big deal competition, I don't know if it was like regional or state, not much of a weightlifting enthusiast, he kissed her on the mouth though in congratulation. And I keep telling myself he was just caught up in the moment because the alternative is so gross, but yeah, that was an immediate firing. Next story. One of our principals was an alcoholic. English teacher saw him after class leaving his office with wet pants and wobbling down the stairs, leaning on the wall. Then he was fired and later was rehired as government official, suburb administration or something like that. Then, one history teacher was skinny, yelling and hell of angry. She was threatening misbehaving kids with her ex-convict brother. We wrote a petition to remove her, and she was removed from teaching in our class, and later she was fired. And then another principal was told to leave on her own or state security service, Kazakhstan, will take her from the celebration of the 1st of September in handcuffs in front of all of the school. She was investigated for embezzlement. Gee, the early 2000s, they were crazy. Next story. It was a teacher at a school where I worked at. He went berserk and attacked a secretary, beating her and giving her a neck injury. He punched a security guard who intervened, then smashed his hand through a window. He ran off to his on-campus apartment, and he was told he had 3 days to leave the country. At the end of the 3 days, staff entered his apartment and found that there was a whitish film that seemed to be dried male fluids all over the furniture. They took it to a field near the school and burned it. Good times. Next story. For being racist. A professor in college didn't pass a kid, causing him not to graduate. The kid was pissed and didn't want to have to retake just one class to graduate, so he decided to pull the race card, get the teacher fired, and get his diploma. The kid is Hispanic and said the teacher was racist against Hispanics, except that half the graduating class was Hispanic. But the school didn't want to deal with it and just gave the kid what he wanted. The teacher was kind of a jerk, but he didn't deserve that. Next story. 2 teachers were fired during my high school years. One was a history teacher. He was a really good teacher. He had been a college wrestler and competed in Olympics. Years later, while teaching us, a student, male football lineman, kept effing with them, slamming his shoulder into him really hard when walking by, insulting him in class and crap like that. One day, as class was getting out, the student two-hand shoved him back into a wall. The teacher then went in for a wrestling takedown and put the kid through a desk, very seriously injured. Never saw that teacher again, but I know they didn't file any charges against him. The student didn't return either. Some rumors said he couldn't use the stairs due to his injuries, old buildings with no elevators and ramps at the time, while others said he just transferred out of the district. Then, second was an English teacher. She was a really good teacher as well, but she was caught in an inappropriate relationship with a female student, statutory SA at minimum. And finally, the odd one that never got fired was an old male English teacher who'd spend his time after school in the boys' locker room watching the kids shower after sports practices. He always had an excuse for being there, but most of the students just gave up and went home in their sweaty, dirty gear. Next story. Had a professor at community college get fired for saying something super racist. It was a writing class and we all had to select a poem to read aloud. I wasn't paying attention to anyone's poems, just sitting there quietly, and this African-American woman reads her poem and we all politely clap a little. The professor stands up and says, "That sounds like an N-word gospel." Caught me way off guard. I wasn't even sure I heard what I thought I heard. It was extremely out of character for that guy too, or I would have thought. He was an old hippie-looking guy. Next story. Librarian was embezzling school funds earmarked for development of our new library to buy furniture and other stuff for her house. Then I attended a fundamentalist Christian high school, and 2 female married teachers got caught making out one morning before school by the school secretary. They forgot to unlock the door to let the students in and, I don't know, lost track of time or something. Next story. Former principal. I've fired 5 teachers and moved on several more. 4 were simply crap teachers who had no control, made no improvement after intensive support, and eventually enough was enough. And 1 was fired because she was a narcissistic bully with a victim complex. The rest, they were moved on because they were either not good enough or were having a negative effect on team morale, or were not nice to people or didn't like children. Others were non-teaching staff having been fired for alcoholism, theft, attendance issues, online behavior, and general twattery. I was a principal for over 20 years. Next story. Alright, I've got 2 stories. My 2nd grade teacher, she threw my desk across the room because I couldn't find my homework fast enough. This smart aleck kid in the front row couldn't find his either, and she started counting down from 10. And with every number, she turned a deeper shade of red. And at 2, he found it and read out the answer. She scanned the room and saw me, and I must have been panicked because somehow she knew I couldn't find mine either. And I barely squeaked out, "I can't find mine either," and she raged down the aisle, roared that I should get out of the way, picked up my desk, and shook everything onto the floor and threw it on the ground. Found my math homework, and then made me sit in my chair in the middle of the mess and read out the answer. As for me, my mom had died like 10 months earlier. I was almost nonverbal and a straight-A student. I just started at the school a month prior in the middle of the school year. I never told anyone, but my uncle found out because my cousin was in class with me. Not only did she get fired, she got kicked out of her religious order. She was a nun. And my 2nd story is just like a lot of the others here. Gym teacher caught with high school student in his office. They moved in together after she graduated. Next story. So, I'm not sure if he got fired or left before he would have been fired, but my high school English teacher, years after I graduated, left his wife for a former student. I'm pretty sure that she was a recent former student too, like 19 to 21 years old. And he was a very good-looking man and the brother of a famous Hollywood actor. I.e., you would know his brother. He's been in tons of stuff. Pretty scandalous when it happened. So I have one teacher who I don't think was fired, but we wanted him fired, and people brought this to the attention of the principal's office. But we had one math teacher who was just really bad, sucked. Math is still my worst subject, so that didn't help at all either. And he was kind of a loser. He told us a story about how he played college basketball one time, and he was always like, "Man, I just gotta be in a good mood, good mood, good mood." They never let him play. Like, he seriously never played because he was so bad at college basketball, but he's like, I was always there to, like, give him Gatorade or, like, wipe the towels or sniff their ass or something. And I kind of zoned out, but my friend was just like, the story was that you didn't do anything, like, you didn't accomplish anything, you suck. You never played, bro. Like, I don't know, that's not a motivational story to say I never did it. And he was just so bad that really, like, that same friend went to the office and was just like, hey, we need a better math teacher. And then the person at the office was like, yeah, we've gotten a lot of complaints about him. And I don't know, I think I had him till the rest of the year or something like that, but I hope that he got a different subject. Nice guy, just kind of dumb and a loser. I'm sorry, but it's true. But he was tall, so at least he's got that going on for him. But anyway, guys, we're at the end of the video. Thank you all so much for watching, commenting, and have a good one. Bye-bye.